listeners, I have a very special guest today, Mary. She is an online business mentor and she is just killing it in this space. I'm super excited to dive in and hear your story. You're just doing amazing things. I know you've gone to scaled your business just in the few years that you've been doing it, and it's super inspiring. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. So I'm so excited to be on, and I grew super quickly. We started the business back in 2018, 2019 with $100 to my name in my bank account. And then I had our first $100,000 cash month in 2022. So it's been a wild ride. And yeah, just the growth has been incredible, from hiring team, firing team, doing sales calls. Now we don't do sales calls. Just the growth of it all has been so immense and massive. So I'm so excited to chat.
Awesome. Yeah, I really want to dive into your story for sure and how this all came to be. And then I would love to talk about how you were able to scale, because I think that's a part of business that a lot of people get stuck at. They think, starting the business is super hard, and getting yourself to a point where you can even think about scaling is an accomplishment on its own, but then it's a whole other beast when you're all right, hiring people. I would notice you said firing people. Would love to get into that because that's a tricky thing too. But let's start at the beginning. Where did this whole business kind of grow from? Where was that idea? Did you always want to do this? Let us know.
Yeah, such a good question. So I had a graphic design business prior to this where I was freelancing and I was doing websites and all of that. And I just had that always on the side. I did that probably after I finished high school, to be honest, for ever. So through university, I was taking on projects, and that just started to grow and grow. And I was in marketing and sales for most of my life. I actually studied fashion communication. So I wanted to get into the magazine world or branding or advertising, something in that, and do luxury. So one of the first big things for me was I got into luxury retail, and I was selling furs. So we were at a fur salon. And I remember this woman walking in. We had this big trunk show, and she put on a fur jacket. I'm like, oh my gosh, you look gorgeous in that. And, she's walking in, just owning it. And she just kind of gave me a dirty look and rolled her eyes. And I was like, oh shit. I don't know. I was freaking out a little bit. And then she was she put on another jacket. And I was like, you look so good in everything. I swear, And she was like, can you effing stop that? I get it. You're trying to sell. And I was like, oh my gosh. And this was my first week on the job. And I'm just okay. And then I just kind of left that alone, and I put a jacket on myself. It was this gorgeous pink fur jacket. And I looked at myself in the mirror feeling like $1 million, Beyonce moment. And I turned around and I saw 3 to 5 women, I can't remember, behind me. And they asked me, they're like, where did you get that jacket? It looks so good on you. And that was actually my first high ticket sale. So what I realized was the attraction piece versus the actually go after it, go do the thing. And obviously you need that. It's not don't take action. That's not what I'm saying at all. But, a lot of people focus so much in the online world, especially on sales and marketing and go. And there's no space for this magnetism, this attraction, and let me go over here and do my thing. And the way that I see this now online is instead of people who make posts that are I'm looking for 5 people who want this thing in the next 30 days. Instead it's I'm over here doing my thing, and then people just find me. So that was actually such an important lesson, because then that came back later in life when I had a sales team and I was doing the heavy stuff. And I remembered that woman, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing. I have a sales team. I'm go. And then I realized I don't want this. I don't want to be numbers, KPIs, reverse engineering things. I want to really focus on how do I attract people into my space. And that's where everything shifted. And then that's where we had our first 100K month after that.
Wow, that's super powerful. I think that just goes to show that you can be doing all the quote unquote right things. And if you feel why isn't this working? Why isn't it working? It could just be because it's not aligned with who you are and the way that you operate. And I feel like you just seem like you're so aligned with your business, and that is like your thing. I love the idea of attracting, and I think that's like something so cool that we can do on social media. It's like let people into our world and kind of, like it's almost when you're like attracting your ideal client, of course, that's like the goal, but just by kind of doing your own thing and knowing that you are attracting them.
And there's such a weird energy, I would say, in the business space sometimes with people who are like, I need a sale by the end of the week. I need this to work. I need this to like, and there's a lot of that. And it's like this endless cycle of like trying to do that. And then you don't have clients. So then you get back into this like needy lack kind of a space. And it's this like hustle and grind versus I've always tried to build my business off of abundance. So I always had side jobs. I always had things that would fund the business. Because I mean, I've never, like, I thought making $100K a year was like, you're rich. Like you have a mansion, you have a car, like, and a nice car, like you have a Lambo. I don't know where I was living, but like, that was my reality. Is like, I never knew people who were making 6 figures, 7 figures, like all of that. So when I came into this space, I always wanted to have my needs that were met. Like that was always so important to me. And I think a lot of people come in high and dry, ready to make things happen, and then it puts you in such a weird space. So like one of the biggest things I say to like new entrepreneurs is like, have a job so it funds things. And the biggest thing is like, especially online, people don't treat things like a business. Like I have someone, one of my close friends who runs a business in person at like a local mall to us, and they spend like $80K a month just on rent. Like that's $1 million a year just on rent, not including staff, not including equipment. So we're so blessed and lucky in the online space and in content creation to be like, yeah, it's free. I could just show up. But then there's the other side of like, do you want to just show up and have a content creation business, or do you want a business where then like you need mentorship, you need these things that obviously cost money. So that's where, having something that funds is so, so important.
Yeah, you don't want to be in that, like you were saying, kind of lack mindset where you're then just scavenging around, like what can I sell? What client can I get on right now? I just need to make money. And then, first of all, you're not I've definitely fallen victim to this at one point or another in my business where I'm just like, crap, I just need to make money. What's going on? And then you end up with clients that aren't super aligned with you. They're not your ideal people to work with. You're kind of just doing it to do it, or you're putting out offers that you don't truly believe in, and then it's not worth it. You're not making that much because it's hard to sell something you don't believe in or work with somebody that doesn't really align with your business. So yeah, it's so much better to be in a space where you can be like, you know what, I'm waiting to attract my ideal people to work with. I can take more time on the offers I'm putting out and be more intentional with what I'm doing.
And we practically like burned the business to the ground last year actually because of this.
Wow.
Was like I built so much of hustle, grind, all of that. So like I said, we had a sales team. I had appointment setters, closers, like that whole model where then we were looking at numbers all the time. So there was a lot of that. So people who then came into our space, like if you've ever been on a sales call, sometimes they can feel super icky and you feel the pressure behind the sale. So I totally had people who were on my team that were doing this, just everything. So like then clients, like you said, that come into your space are not the right people at all. Not ideal. Like struggle to pay after month 2 because this was their last straw. And then I'm like, what are we doing this all for? So it's like either starting the business in a really aligned place of like, what do you actually want? And trust yourself. Like, don't let all the things that you hear influence what you decide to do. And that's been a game changer.
Yeah, it's definitely like the comparison game for sure. I've found as a online business and you're in social media and everything, it's so easy to see someone else's business and be like, oh, should I be doing that? Should I be structuring my offers that way? Should I be, do the sales calls? I have definitely been doing that sometimes to myself, and it's not productive at all because you kind of have to figure out how you operate best and what feels best for you in order to, first of all, enjoy your business. I think that sometimes we get really caught up in trying to reach that next goal or get that next level of income or have a bigger team, and you kind of lose sight of like, am I enjoying this?
Setting goals.
Yeah, okay, I love that. Yeah. Do you feel that that's just been, you have more peace maybe since?
So the way that I used to set goals was like, I want this amount of money in this period of time. Like this is how we're taught like growing up in school, set SMART goals,
Right.
measurable, time, whatever. So I was like, I want this goal in this period of time, reverse engineer the goal, like very much like that. And then what I found is you're never happy. Like if your goal is 10 clients, one client, still a failure, 5 clients, still a failure, 9, still a failure, 10, yay, a win. Okay, now 20, 1 still a failure. So then you're always on this cycle of like, gratification. And even when that happens, I find especially a lot of women struggle to celebrate too their wins. So it's just a hot mess. So what I start doing is really looking at like, what is my intention? And then each day it's consistent growth and evolution. So it's how do I keep getting closer and closer to becoming that person who then achieves that thing. So it's like, it shifted everything. Like even I would get on, I remember one of my first investments in business was $6K, but I showed up so much in that first version of myself that was like hustle, grind, goal setting, etc. So I showed up on every single call. I implemented everything. I did all the things. I got on 165 sales calls before I closed a single client, who then wanted a refund within 12 hours because she's like, actually, I don't have the money. So here I am, like, nothing in my bank account left. I've drained everything and I'm so frustrated. And I'm like, do I even want to continue and do this? So when I went on to my next investment, crazy, because it was a $20,000 investment. Still, like I haven't made any money in my business at this point. And I realized so many things from that investment. I'm like, this could work. This could be absolute crap. I don't know if I can say things on your podcast, but
you're good.
But I was like, this could be horrible. Like, I don't know, but I'm just going to trust myself because I want to do this. And no matter what, it's working for me. So it was like, the first one was I was looking for validation. I was looking to get a result. I was looking for what am I going to get for what I put in. The second one was like, I'm already winning from just not even being in there yet. So actually, if I think about something that changed my life the most, it was those 2 investments and seeing the difference. And that then shifted everything. Because now, when I see conversations with people and I'm in masterminds, I'm in private coaching, whatever it is, it's like I am so fed by everything versus you can have 2 people in one room and someone's like, well, my question didn't get answered. And it's like, I can have that exact same experience and then see so much from the flip side. So honestly, out of all things, it's like that actually is what will change your life in business. Whether you're in business or not, that'll change your life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. It's so true. Like with masterminds and everything like that, it can be so powerful, but it also has to do with kind of the mindset you're going into it with and what you do with that information. Like I love it. It's like exactly what you said, that there could be 2 people in the same room and one could walk away and be like, wow, apply that knowledge, like have certain mindset, but the other could be like, meh, whatever, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Mm-hmm. It's not that important. That is like the difference between people that are super successful and people maybe that haven't figured it out yet. And I love that you said you had an investment prior to that where it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe that didn't really totally work out the best for you, but you didn't give up. Like you can keep going. Like it's okay. I think in entrepreneurship, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to go through times where you're like, is this right? You just have to follow what you best feel. I kind of want to jump into now how you were able to kind of scale. Like at what point for you was like, hey, all right, I need to like start hiring people. What did that look like for you?
Such a good question. And I feel like this is an evolution. Like it's not like one day that's like,
yes.
All right, time to scale. It was more of just like a consistent, I would say we were probably around 20K per month before I hired anyone in my business. I was doing everything myself. So, I mean, then you're at almost 250K or so per year just by yourself, which is incredible. But anyone who's I'm in the coaching space right now, but anyone who's in coaching, like expert knowledge, like that kind of business, I truly don't feel like you actually need help and support until you're at 6 figures, unless, I mean, everyone's different, unless someone really struggles with like content creation. Content creation is important and you don't want to be the one that cuts things up. Like I was lucky that I had a graphics background and like I was good at that stuff. So I could take photos, I could do these things, like I was already artistic. But some of my clients who don't have that skill, like, yeah, it's important to hire, but you can hire someone at quite cheap costs just for like little things like that. So But really, I would say that's still in like the growth phase of hiring is like getting little helpers, I would say is like hiring. How do I get help with this? When you're thinking about scaling, it's now looking at how do I bring on leaders who can then lead in these things. So, I'll have people who come with their own ideas and they're like, I want to create this, I'm going to create, in the marketing content space, it's people who are like versions of me that can create in their own space. But I think scaling, especially online, is actually so easy. And that's why I bring up mindset a lot. It's like everything comes down to like, you're the entrepreneur, it's your decisions in terms of how you decide to move. The better you are at decision making, the better scaling, the easier everything else becomes.
100%. Yeah. I love that. And yeah, when you're first getting started in your business, like the first hire is probably going to look like more of a just delegating work that you kind of are like, hey, what can I get off my plate so I can focus on the things that either you enjoy more or you're better at, kind of looking at your skills and be like, how can I best be used for my business kind of thing. So that was something that was tricky for me for sure, was figuring out actually what is my job description versus what can I hire, what can I delegate. It's definitely a crazy process going from like solopreneur where you're wearing every single hat in your business and like doing everything to all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I can have people.
And that's the thing. I feel like some people want to hire too early because they don't want to do the dirty work. You know what I mean? They're like, I don't want to get my hands dirty. And I think that's actually a big mistake. Like, I think a lot of people can sometimes hire too soon, or they want to be, because it's this business, I want to go to Starbucks. I want to do this. Like, I want to just live my life. And of course, that's why we start a business, is to have the freedom, is to have these things. But sometimes doing that too soon, like, that's another piece where you're like, similar to what I said earlier, we had to burn everything to the ground and rebuild, rise from the ashes. So it's like the same thing happens here when it's like when you remove yourself too quickly, sometimes that happens again where you're like, why does nobody understand what I mean when I say this? And things are just messy.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of learning that goes into that first really like rough work as an entrepreneur, like building up the business. And you learn a lot, and I think you get a little bit used to, okay, not everything's going to go perfect all the time. You kind of have to have those mistakes and failures because it's going to make it easier for you to have mistakes and failures in the future, which sounds so weird, but you kind of have to get used to it as an entrepreneur, like having the rough times, having, failing at certain things. So if you kind of don't get that out of the way at first and you have this almost unrealistic expectation that it's like, oh, it's going well, it's quite easy, it's going to be fine. And eventually when that bad thing happens, you're going to feel like, oh my God, it's like the worst thing ever.
100%.
Versus like, I've been here, it's okay.
100%. No, I love that you say that because it really is like normalizing failures. And making that, like, not having it be, oh, I wanted this many clients, only this came on. It's like making that stuff normal. Because when that stuff becomes a big deal, it's like either you won't last in business building or it's not going to be fun and you're going to hate it. Like, no one wants either option. But if you normalize it and it's like, okay, cool, 2 clients came on, taking it as learnings and taking it as lessons, but also I feel like people focus so much on the short term. Like, I know You on Netflix just came out, so it's like binge time to go on Netflix and watch this series. So it's like there's a lot of like instant gratification, everything. We can pick up our phone and I just ordered Uber Eats. Like, it's the quickness of everything. In entrepreneurship, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, 100%. And I truly believe, like, if you stick at it, you will be successful no matter what. So it's having that thought process of, do I want, like, I know a lot of my clients are like, oh, I want $1 million in the next 12 months. But it's like, instead of focusing again on the timeline, really just looking at it of like, I want to be the person that can create $1 million years. Whenever I'm aligned to that, it'll happen. And then each day it's just building up that skill set. And again, if you're starting from safety where you can pay your bills, like you have something that can pay that, then you just show up so much differently. You're like, okay, I can focus on brand building. I can focus on, advertising my brand, getting on podcasts. Like, I can do all these things and have so much fun versus it being, I need a sale really quickly.
Right. You can like really build the foundation properly kind of thing. For sure. Yeah. I feel like that was something that I so rushed into my business, which was a really cool and a beautiful thing, but totally then you have to get to a point where you're like, okay, whoa, I need to make sure that I'm like doing this right, and now I have to go
It
back and
catches
like
up
fix
sooner
a
or
lot
later.
of things, right? Or like learn things that I didn't learn before that I should have, or stuff like that. So it's definitely a
Yeah.
journey, and the instant gratification thing is so real. Oh my gosh, like how easy is it to like, you know, put out some offer that you're like, yeah, whatever, I just want to make a quick sale, like things like that, where you're just like, oh, this is just
Yeah.
not the way to build a
Yeah, I
business.
relate it so much to relationships. It's like if you're like, I want to get married by the end of the week, and you're hitting up like 100 restaurants, 100 bars, like you're trying to like meet people. Like, firstly, you probably won't meet the person. And even if you do, like, is that actually the right person? I don't know. So it's like, it's the same thing. It's really looking for the right and the aligned person versus I just want people in my space. Because again, it's going to catch up with you sooner or later and bite you in the butt, and you're going to not like it.
Right.
So for me, what happened was I was so focused on sales and marketing, like I said, so I would do events, bring people on sales calls, you know, master classes, all of that. And it was a lot of work, but then people would join my space, so I would continue doing it. And one of the things I say too is like sometimes things that work, but you don't like them can actually be worse than if you just
Right.
failed at it. Because you're like, it worked, so I should just keep doing it. So then you do, but you don't like it. So
Mhm.
that's where I got really caught up is I was doing and doing and doing and doing, and it was working. And then I realized, especially with this strategy, in between events that we would hold, there was like nothing that people would plug into. Like there was no podcast, there was no brand. So, you know, I think about Apple and Starbucks, like they have such a strong brand that they don't need to sell. Like you walk into a Starbucks, you buy your thing and you hang out. You go to Apple, like I'm on a desktop, I have a laptop, I have an iPhone, like you just consistently buy from the same place without them marketing
Right.
and selling to you so much. So for me, that's where I was like, I really should have a brand. Like I have to have something that people can consistently plug into. So to what you're saying, it's like either doing it right from the beginning or just knowing that it'll catch up with you. So enjoying that process of like, how can I actually feed my people without it being focused on me?
Yeah, I love that. And I like I just really like your mindset around you're basically striving to become a certain person, not have a certain goal. I think that's really powerful, especially with business where you don't really know what that's going to look like. It's really hard to plan out, like genuinely know exactly where your business is going to go, like long term, and kind of see that path really clearly. But if you can see the person you want to be, or like the lifestyle you want, like what do you want your day to look like, what kind of person do you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an easier thing to kind of imagine, and then you can
Yeah.
from there just be intentional with the person you're becoming, and hopefully your business will follow suit, and you can kind of take note of, yeah, if you're doing something and you're like, I don't like doing this, like this is not how I want to spend my day, then why are you doing it? Like, let's switch it up. Let's do
Yeah.
something. And so, not that you're going to enjoy every single second of your business. There's going to be times that are hard and you have to do some stuff that's not fun. But for the most part, if you find yourself every day being like, am I enjoying this? Like, do I like my
Totally.
business? It's questions that you have to ask yourself for sure.
Yeah.
So, tell me about your experience having to let go of employees or stop working with people. Has that been difficult for you?
Always, always. It's always hard. Um, and at the end of the day, too, I've developed like a pretty strong communication style with this around like how to communicate these things. But it's always going to be hard. I think it's understanding like you're a human, they're a human. We're going to feel sad about this. Like this is going to suck.
Yeah.
And just knowing that. When I am looking to end things, and this again comes to relationships or ending like friendships or whatever, it's always similar. But I start by actually thinking like, what do I love about this person? Like, what have they done that's been so incredible for me? And always starting from my heart. If I'm noticing that I'm getting into this place where I'm like, well, nothing, that's why I'm firing them, then I have to like actually do some work because I'm like not at the place to have this conversation from like a good, healthy, loving space, or else it's just going to be me getting triggered and being really responsive. And we've all had those moments and not fun conversations when we're just like reactive to someone and snappy and just not good. So, I really feel out for like what I actually love about the person. For some people, it was communication style. So I'm someone that has a million gazillion ideas, and I will do like a bunch of voice notes and all the things, and that can be really overwhelming for some people. Like some people need like a structured fill in the blank for me. What am I doing? All right. And like I'm not that person. Like my brain just doesn't work like that. So sometimes it's a communication style. And like the earlier you recognize that, the better too, because then I can help for future people. I can tell them like, this is how I work. Does that feel good for you as well? Like if I have a million ideas and then we need to change everything today, like you're working on something and then we're going a 180. Some people are like, no, that would like drive me nuts, right? So it's like we can prevent that obviously by really understanding ourselves. So it's really just having that conversation from a really heart-centered place and understanding them and all the amazingness that they've done. So for instance, in that sort of a conversation, I've said things like, I don't know if I'm the best leader for this kind of a person. And I'd have that conversation being like, this is how I typically lead. And I see that you really excel in this kind of a leadership. And I know that I'm not that person. And I want you to be in a space where you expand and you're consistently growing. And then I recommend a few places that may be a better fit. So for instance, someone like that has more of that like freelancer mindset, like fill in the brief and then I'll complete the brief, right? Might do well in a design agency as an example. So it's just really having a conversation where it's heart to heart and it's not, I'm pissed off, this just happened, now I'm going to have this conversation, because we all have that like fire within us sometimes. So it's just taking a step back, breathe, do your thing, and then coming into it.
Yeah, like leading with empathy, I think is a huge thing as a leader. And that's a really big value I have in my business, is always being empathetic to people. And I love that approach that you were taking, just like with your heart first, like we're human beings before we are whatever, an
like
employee or whatever.
I've been so triggered. Like I remember this one person who, she was actually quitting because she was actually the first hire that I brought on. She was in like the fitness space, so I knew she was coming on like almost temporarily. Like she wants to do something else, but she's here to support customer service, etc. So she sent a message, and this was like right before Thanksgiving, so we were getting on a long holiday. And I was like, oh my gosh, why before Thanksgiving? And I need to see friends and family. So like, again, we're human, we're going to have all these feelings. And I'm like freaking out. Now we don't have a client person. Now I need to look for a client person. And finding someone actually takes a long time in my space because I want the right person, right? So, I went through all my emotions. And the first thing that comes up is like anger, resentment, frustration, like all of that, rage. Like I was just like a firebomb ready to explode. And then I took a step back and really also looked at her perspective. Like, so this is something that actually really helps me, is where in my life have I been in that position?
Right.
So I think about moments where I've left something because I want to do something that's so important to my heart. And then I'm like, I feel it. And like instantly I can be so empathetic with that. And I'm like, I can resonate with being in her shoes, being in a position that I loved actually, but wasn't aligned with my long-term vision. And I can see that happening. So then when we had our conversation, it went from, instead of, if I went from that like fiery, crazy energy, it would have been a horrible conversation. You know what I mean? Like you're just triggered. It would have been a disaster. But instead it was she even came on and she was like, if you need me to, train anyone new that you bring on, I'm happy to train them. Like whatever you need, I'm here for you. Like it was such a beautiful conversation. And I feel like no one's ever taught emotional intelligence or conversation skills. So having this level of depth in conversation, like connection, is everything. So when you can connect, I truly feel like this is one of the greatest and easiest paths to everything. It makes sales easy. It makes team stuff easy. It's like you understanding yourself and then you understanding how to communicate.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. I think that's creating a really amazing environment too for your business, and you're creating a space where people enjoy working with you, because it sounds like you're a very great leader, and I think that warrants a lot of respect too from your team. And even if they end up having to be let go, I think that's like a really beautiful way to kind of communicate, and you're not really burning bridges in that case too. You never know how you're going to connect with these people in the future. My biggest thing with like business too is like, I don't want anybody being able to go and say something like a bad thing about me, or they've had a bad experience with me. Like you don't want to put people into the world that
Yeah.
could say that about your business. Like, you want everyone to have a good experience, even if that happens to be maybe they're not the right fit. That's such a good way to go about it. I think that like causes a lot, because I'm like asking like selfishly, because I'm kind of at the point of my business where I'm building up my team for the first time and I haven't yet had to let anyone go. I love everyone I work with. I don't see there being any issues, but I'm also not naive to think that I'm not going to have to let anyone go for the rest of my life as a business owner.
Or they might quit,
Or
and
they
then
might
you're
quit,
like,
yes.
oh my gosh, I just lost my right-hand person.
Absolutely. So it's kind of like preparing yourself, and I think that like calms a lot of anxiety maybe, to be like, you know what, it doesn't have to be this really traumatic rage situation. It can be just like a transition, and you know, that's just like the evolving of a business.
And sometimes I feel like your fears happen for you to know that you're okay when they come to fruition. So for instance, if you have such a big hang up, like I had such a big hang up on letting someone go and having someone leave, and having this be, because I've had such horrible traumatic experiences myself in the corporate world, being, leaving, and then whatever. Like I recorded a whole podcast episode on like just being torn to pieces by my toxic manager. And it was just like, I did never want to be that person. So there was a lot of, I mean, that's hard. You're putting yourself on this pedestal. You're putting yourself on like, I can't make mistakes. I need to be perfect. So that's the other side of it, is like, if you've had horrible experiences, sometimes you're like, well, I want to make sure that this is good, and then this is good, and that this is good. So I honestly feel like having conversations I've had conversations with my team to be like, I am not a manager. Like, I know I am not good at this stuff. I'm not going to be good at managing you guys. Like, I'm an entrepreneur first, and I'm like a thought leader, and this is who I am. So I'm going to do my best. This is what I see, but I'm open. Like, if you feel like something could be working better, if you feel like you need support in a certain way. So it's really just the open dialogue. And I feel like you actually showing like an understanding. So understanding yourself first and then sharing that. So for me, sharing that my brain goes a million miles an hour was huge, because some people don't like that. Like, they just can't handle that. So that was a big thing of, instead of this, again, taking 6 months to a year for you to go back and forth and for us to try and find something that works, like really just that is huge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. I love that. Just like being open about who you are, or being aware of who you are, I think is super important as an entrepreneur. Like, if you don't feel like you're very self-aware or you don't fully understand yourself, that is definitely something to dive into for sure. Especially when you start managing other people, for sure. It's going to be 100%. A lot easier to kind of communicate that. I love that open dialogue kind of style too, where you're just honest. You're not showing up and pretending to be like, putting on a mask and be like, yes, I am a boss lady, I am a manager, like everyone has to do what I say. Instead, it's
because
like,
when you F up, because you will, people aren't pissed off. They actually see you as a human.
Yeah.
And this is why for so many celebrities, like, they have such trauma. Like, it's just horrible, because people see them on this pedestal, and the only way off is a very dramatic and traumatic way down off a pedestal, right? So it's really just being like, listen, I'm human. I'm going to try my best. Here's like where I'm at, and just having that conversation. And I see this also showing up if you're in like masterminds or coaching programs, or like you're in your own learning. One thing that was huge for me was recognizing, like, in the beginning, you buy these things so that you learn stuff. Like, that's like tier one of like mentorship conversations, right? But then after that, what I realized is, I just got off actually a mastermind call. And what was so incredible is seeing people who get triggered, like people who, and these are people who are making 7, 8 on their way to 9 figures in their business, like massive, massive leaders. And they're like, I'm afraid to take up too much space in this conversation. Or ask a question. So I think there's two sides to this. There's one of being like super humble, in a sense of like, we all have the same fears, whether you're at $0 in your business or you have a team of like 300 people. Like, it doesn't matter. The same fears come up, and the more vulnerable you are, the more you'll actually learn in those settings. But it's also recognizing that, like, one of my greatest lessons has been this. It's like feeling triggered in certain spaces, comparing to other people. Like, that's actually where the learning happens. Like, that's the work, versus let me put a masterclass together. Let me do this, because you can give 2 people the exact same strategy, and like, why does one kill it and the other one takes years to get the same results? It's like, your power, your conviction, your confidence. So like the way that I've seen people skyrocket this process and do this at hyper speed has been putting yourself in rooms that are super uncomfortable, that really stretch you and trigger you, but really activate you.
Yes, that's like something I super believe in too. It's something that's I would credit most of my growth as an entrepreneur and a person even from doing exactly that. Like going into rooms where you're like, this is not comfortable. This is like super intimidating. Like I don't even feel that, like it's not even a good feeling at first. It's a little bit like, whoa, daunting. But yeah, the growth that can come out of that, if you commit to, sorry, being in that situation and going in full speed and being like, all right, I'm owning it. Like this is my spot in the room. And even if you don't fully believe it, like telling yourself you deserve space in that room, it kind of is this huge shift. And then you become exposed to people that are just like, wow, just big thinkers huge. And like just things that you wouldn't think of for yourself.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And I think the other side of this too, though, is seeing like I learn from people who are making 5K in their month. 5K a month in their business. Like, I think that's the other side of humility, is not being like, oh, I'm making a certain amount, so I need to be in rooms where people are making more than me, or all of this. It's also being like, I've learned so much from all sorts of people. So it's also, again, like really humbling yourself, and also being like, I don't know everything. And even if I think I do, I don't. Mm-hmm. So I go into every room as if I know nothing, because then I actually get everything. If I think I know everything, I get nothing. Ooh, that should be quoted.
I was somewhere. Just going to say, I was like, is that like a famous? Wow, that's such a good
No,
thing.
I'm like, but it sounded so good.
No, it's so true.
But that's truly it, because I had a point where I hit like an ego space in my business where I'm like, oh, I'm making this amount and blah, blah, blah. And then it was just horrible. Like you learn nothing. Your growth is, just nothing. So what I realized was getting myself into a space and really having, and I've seen this with clients that are even like baby business owners, but still say, no, I know this stuff already. Like I have, and that's the difference. And then on the flip side, I'll see a client who's making millions and she's attending like a free masterclass that I'm doing. And this other one's like, no, I don't want to attend a free masterclass or whatever. Like I've done this stuff. So it's like really stepping in from this place of like, no knowledge, I'm coming in to learn and absorb everything.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So true. It's such a dangerous thing to happen as a business owner, to start to think, oh, okay, yeah, I like just become super like have that ego and be like, I know everything now. I'm at a good place. Like I don't need to do these things anymore. And if you think of it like athletes, for example, if you're like, okay, there's one basketball player that's like playing for the very first time, or like an NBA basketball player, like they're both still going to practice. Like you don't get to the NBA and then you're like, okay, I did it, I'm the best, I don't need to learn anything, I don't need to practice anymore, I don't need to do anything. It's like, no, you gotta keep going. Like that's who truly stays successful, is the people who like, I love that you said you had a student who's like making millions in like a free masterclass. Like that is the coolest thing. Those are the people that, I don't know, they're like fully committing to always being a student almost. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And it's not even knowledge. Like I think knowledge is one thing, but then you'll hear something again and it deepens and it lands so differently for you the second time. And then you hear it again and then you're starting to like really refine it. And then you hear it again and then you're starting to innovate on it. So it's like all of these layers on top of each other. Like I go to my mentor sessions that are free, the paid ones, all of them. And then I have clients that do the same thing. And they're like, oh my gosh, what you just said, I've heard you say this for the past 3 years, but now it's landed differently. It's like if you ever read a book, but you're in a different time in your life, that you read that book with such a different angle, or you found something in that book that you're like, I did not know that that character said that. Like, what? And then you're seeing such a different picture of this entire thing because of that. So that's also the massive bit about this, is like repetition is so important. I think they say like something needs to be repeated 7 times or 10 times, something like that, for you to actually even understand it, like grasp it, not even like deepen it, refine it, innovate on it, but just to understand it. So it's like just to hear something over and over and over, and you get to that point where that's where you're like, aha moments come in. And a lot of entrepreneurs, especially, I'll hear things like, oh, I struggle to stay motivated, or I struggle with this and that. It's like, so keep plugging into stuff. Like keep plugging into things that motivate you. Keep, plugging into the things that excite you to innovate. So like I will listen to sessions with, masterminding calls or whatever it is where I'm hearing all these things and then just something just bubbles up and then I innovate something and then it's super successful. But it's because I keep my education going.
Right, you're always open to that. And yeah, as you go through life, as you have different experiences and you learn more, you're in a different place, like exactly what you said, that happened to me where I read a book that like a year before I even started my business. And then I had a mentor who recommended that I read that book. And I was like, oh, I already read it. And he was like, no, you should read it again. Like, you're in a whole different space now. I read it when I was like 18 years old and whatever. And now I'm like 24 and have this business. So I read it again and I was like, wow, that was like a whole different experience. Like, wow, you just understand it so differently. And it's a really cool thing. So I think always, staying open-minded to learning is so
I think that's a
important.
great example.
Right? Yeah, I was just like, oh, I'm like kind of a different person. So of course you're going to experience the information differently. Like we were even saying, like going back to like the very beginning of this episode where there's two people in a mastermind, you can take something totally different from it because you're both in different places in your businesses or life, or you've had a different past or whatever. You can take the information completely differently. So yeah, 100%. That's a good takeaway for today, everybody. Stay open,
100%.
Keep learning, stay humble, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I would say just trusting that everything is perfect. So like that was another big takeaway for me is like I would be in rooms where I'm like, because I'm paying so much, I need to consume everything. So it's like how you see everything is how you see everything. So if I felt like I was in lack, like I need to consume everything because I'm paying for this. It was so different than I have access to an abundance. Like no one pays for a gym membership so that they can use every single machine.
Right.
You go to a gym and you have a membership to use the same 4 or 5 machines that you use on repeat, and you don't care about the other machines, but they're there if you want them. So really just understanding that whatever I decide is always perfect for me and in that timing. So just like you said at the beginning of this episode, speaking about our goals and understanding that whenever things are aligned, that's when you actually hit your goals. It's when you're not looking. It's like, who wants to be staring at a clock to see when it hits 1 p.m.? It's like, instead, go live your life and like, oh shoot, it's past 1 p.m. So, before you know it, you'll wonder, how do I do this? How do I do this? Until one day you're just like, oh my gosh, I just did this.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the biggest distinction is like, instead of setting like a goal and there's a time and there's all these things, it's like, how do I need to be? Who do I need to show up as? And how do I want to live my life in alignment with that? And then the other thing I think about is like, how do I want to tell this story? So like when I have really hard moments, it's like when I look back at this in hindsight and I tell this story to my clients or friends or family or whatever, like how do I want to share this moment?
I love that perspective. I've never thought of it like that, like when you're in a hard time, because it's true. I do think about, like, if I'm in a hard time, I'm like, one day I'm going to look back at this and I'm going to think, oh, haha, I thought that was the end, or I thought that I was the biggest fail. Look at me now. So I try and have that perspective, but I love that you think about how am I going to tell this story.
But it's like, it's a deeper feeling to that, because it's like, how do I want to, even with that team member, it's like, how do I want to tell this story when a client asks me, or I'm on a podcast and someone says, tell me about like your hiring, blah, blah, blah experience. How do I want to tell this story? Do I want to say, honestly, I was super reactive, this is what I did? Or do I want to actually walk through, lead by example, and then share that story?
Yeah, it's almost like that quote or something that people say, like, you would act differently if a documentary team was following you around.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, because you're kind of creating almost the story of your life. And you don't want to be like, oh, yeah, actually, 100%. I just quit my business because I was, like, bored, I was lazy, and I just wanted to watch Netflix.
And it's how you see it. It's how you see it. Like, someone gave this example and it was so good. It was like, imagine you're in a relationship and you see this person, you see these two on a screen, and this guy walks up to the girl and he puts like whipped cream on her nose, and she's just like, oh, so cute, oh my gosh, and he brings her coffee in bed, and you're just looking at this, and then you look at your partner really pissed off, like, why doesn't he do these things? And then so the next day you're out and about and he's like tickling you and all cute and puts whipped cream on your nose, and you're like, shit, I just did my makeup. Like, why are you ruining my makeup? And then he brings you breakfast in bed, and then you see the breakfast in bed, and you're like, I'm already late, I have to go. And it's like, you actually have the same life, but we see it differently. And it's in how we feel and experience these things that actually create our life, not the circumstances itself.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, 100%. Like, we're writing our own story. We get to choose how we write that story, how we live our life, and who we get to be, and even going back to just the way that you want to show up as the person that you want to be. It's almost like almost feels like maybe you're playing a character for a little while, but eventually you'll realize that you're like, oh, I'm not, this is actually myself now, and this is actually my life. I felt like that was a lot when I started experiencing, like, hey, my dreams are coming to fruition. It still felt like I was pretending, and I was like, no, this is like, wow, I made it real. This is so weird.
Yeah. No, it's so good.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I feel like we just had such a good conversation.
We lived a lifetime in like 30, 40.
Yeah, we went through so much. I feel like there's a lot of really great value that we went through and some things that people can implement today. So thank you so much for coming on. If you want to just take a minute and let people know, like, what are you working on right now? Where can we find you? Give us all the details.
Yeah, so we actually just started a TikTok not too long ago. So you can follow me there at Mary Morgan Coaching. And we also just started a podcast as well, the Mary Morgan Show. So if you want to connect, hear more about the behind the scenes of building a business from nothing to $1 million run rate, then you can hear all about that, the team stuff, all the things. But yeah, this has been so nice. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yay, awesome. Well, I'll link all of your stuff in the show notes too, so people can find you there. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Amazing. Thank you. Bye.